Hey guys, it's Judy from Nutrition with Judy, and today I'm very excited. I have with me Sylwia Tabor, who is better known as Biohacking Chick. She is a health coach. She helps you optimize better health, and she is also the mastermind behind Carnivore Snacks. If you have not tried Carnivore Snacks, it is probably the best carnivore snack, and I'm not a big fan of a lot of dry meats, but this meat is a perfect option. So Sylwia, thanks for joining me. If you can sort of introduce yourself and let everyone know that doesn't know you, who you are.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to sort of meet you. I'm still hoping we can meet in person. Who am I? I mean, that question can be pretty deep, but I am a coach, health coach. A lot of people reach out to me for carnivore coaching. That's not the only thing I do. I pretty much work with people to optimize their health from not just nutrition standpoint, but also like their environment, lifestyle, and all that good stuff. So that's mainly what I do. Aside from that, I'm just, a standard average person just trying to be the best version of myself I can be, and improve day by day. So. Yeah, and I don't know if you want me to talk about a little bit of my background when it comes to like the nutrition and
Yes. So if you can talk a little bit about nutrition, kind of how you found carnivore and how you just sort of landed on meat-based being kind of the best for your body.
Yeah, I moved to US when I was 13 and back and I moved from Poland. And in Poland, I basically was raised on a small farm. And we grew everything. We made our own bread. We had our own animals. And that was where I came from to standard American diet at age of 13. And I started kind of developing a lot of health issues. And even back in Poland, I had a lot of gut healing that I needed to do. And moving here to US, it definitely didn't help with that, just eating a lot of processed food and all the cookies, candies, everything I could get my hands on, that kind of made things even worse. And very quickly, I have learned that something was going on. And for me, it was always, for whatever reason, it was always like nutrition. Like I knew it was something that had to do with that. So very early in my age, I started being very curious about food and nutrition and whole just like health, and in high school, I was very active. I played soccer, and I was getting injured very often. And that was kind of like, what's going on over here, And then on top of that, I didn't really have that much energy either. So back in high school, I even started looking into like low carb diet, and because very quickly I started gaining weight. And, when you're a teenager, that's probably not the best idea to go on a diet or start cutting calories or doing any fasting or any that type of stuff. But regardless, I did start doing that very early in my teenage years. And later on, I kind of in college, trying to improve my athletic abilities, I started even cleaning up my diet even more. I started getting away from wheat, dairy, any grains and all that stuff, cleaning up my diet even more. And then, of course, like many people who probably go on vegan diets, I watched all the documentaries that kind of, steered me towards going vegan. And at that point, when I switched from already eating healthy, I was eating just fruits, vegetables, some nuts and meat, a little bit of chicken and fish here and there. I switched to vegan diet, and that did not help me with my playing sports or running, which I did a lot when I was in college. I actually started feeling worse, like going from healthy diet, or I thought was healthy, to vegan. And then I went raw vegan, thinking that if I go raw, the enzymes in the raw fruits and vegetables will give me more energy, you know. So at least that was the promise behind going a raw vegan. So it was that, but it was me mostly like, you know, thinking that, oh, I'm going to save the planet by going vegan, you know. So that was kind of like what led me into the whole vegan journey. And then from vegan, I went to just Fruitarian Diet, which was basically just eating fruits and maybe a little bit of greens, like towards the end of the day. Because I've developed a lot of food sensitivities at that time. I couldn't handle, even pea protein was giving me a lot of joint pain, and I couldn't figure out why. And then the nuts and seeds were absolutely no go for me anymore, even though I was sprouting them and doing like all the stuff that they tell you to do in order to make them more bioavailable and to get rid of all the anti-nutrients. And at that point, my gut was already so bad that even doing that didn't help at all. So I went through that stage, and then after going through Fruitarian Diet, I developed like a massive binge eating disorder, and from that it kind of turned to bulimia, and I struggled with that for 6 years. And I was very convinced that it's not like going to a psychiatrist is not going to help me through this. I knew it was something physical in my physiology. I knew that it was related to food, that I was missing something in my diet. And from that, I stumbled upon Dr. Jack Kruse, who was talking about the leptin reset diet. And essentially, it was carnivore diet. He was only recommending 20 grams of net carbs. And he was just kind of like, oh, if you need to, but if you don't, like, you don't have to like eat vegetables if you don't want to. So at that point, I'm like, well, I don't even feel like eating any vegetables, so I was just eating meat. I started with a lot of pork loin, all that stuff, and then I kind of switched over to more seafood based leptin reset, what he called it. And after just 2 weeks, I noticed like the binging and purging like stopped. Like my brain just like didn't want to do that anymore. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is it. This is working for me, you know? So after, and for me, like binging and purging was basically like multiple times a day. So to go 2 weeks without that, it was just a miracle. It was like, oh my God, this is like my thing, you know, I can stick to this. And after that, I kind of started adding in a little bit more vegetables, then a little bit more fruits, and then I kind of like went off of, you know, just eating like a lot of meat, because then of course I was listening to that, oh my God, you need fiber, you need this and that in your diet, like how are you getting all your nutrients in without the fruits and vegetables? So then I kind of went back into that, you know, thinking like, oh, I need the fiber, I need all of that. So I started putting it back in, and I started noticing, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, why am I getting bloated? You know, why am I getting like so much brain fog? You know, I'm just eating vegetables and fruits, you know. And then the whole ketogenic diet popped in, you know, and I started experimenting with that. And with ketogenic diet, you know, of course you can go into ketosis just through, you know, going lower on your either calories or carbs, you know, or both. But they also, at that time, there was also a lot of like MCT oils and beta hydroxybutyrate this and that, you know, and I was always interested into improving myself and always open to trying new stuff. So of course I started with MCT oil, and my gut did not like it whatsoever. My brain did, but because like as soon as I would take it, my brain would just like turn on, you know, and then but my gut was just like no, like the pain I would get from taking MCT oil, I would be like on the floor from pain from it. And I'm like, I did a little bit more research into that, you know, and then I figured, you know, MCT is essentially antimicrobial. It does kill like the bad stuff and the good stuff as well. And then if you're on top of that have any gut issues, it will not work in a positive way. You know, like a lot of people experience like all the energy, like physical energy, mental energy on top of that. So I did experience a little bit of that, but I just couldn't keep taking it and deal with the pain. So I went through my ketogenic phase, and then during that time, I was kind of like plant-based keto, and because I was measuring all the ketones and all that stuff, and I noticed like, oh, if I lower my protein, my ketones are higher, you know. But at the same time, I didn't necessarily feel any better, you know. So it's like I was going for that number, but you know, it didn't mean that I was feeling better. And during that time, I developed necrotizing fasciitis, which is flesh-eating bacteria, and it was on my torso. And when I got into the hospital, it started spreading very quickly. I went through pretty much hell at the hospital, but afterwards, my gut was even worse. I went through 3 surgeries. I have 2 IVs in each arm with antibiotics hooked up to me in order to fight the infection. And afterwards, after all of that, my gut health got even worse. And even drinking water would make my gut like burn. And it was painful. I'm like, oh my God, I can't eat anything. I can't even drink water at this point. So I decided I was going to go back to cooked vegan diet, because I started reading about like medical medium. I'm sure many of your listeners are probably familiar with that. And he recommends a lot of cooked, starchy, vegan plants, basically. So I started doing that, and very quickly, like I started developing again the binging and the thoughts of purging, and that scared me. And at that point, one of the people I follow on Instagram, he posted something about the carnivore diet, that he's going to be eating only meat. I'm like, he's crazy. Like, what is he doing? He's going to get cancer, like colon cancer, all that stuff, you know? And then another guy kind of pointed me towards Sean Baker's interview with Ryan Muncie. And I'm like, I listened to it. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds pretty, you know, straightforward and good. And I'm like, okay, let me try that. You know, like I don't want to go back to my past, you know, with bulimia and all that stuff. So I'm like, I'm just going to give it a try. I'm going to go against like everything I learned, I believed. I'm just going to give it a go. And I did. And that was over 2 years ago. And I'm still doing the whole carnivore craziness. And now it feels like everybody's doing carnivore, you know, It goes from vegan to carnivore. And I'm kind of happy to see that, because it's a very, very healing diet.
I agree. I mean, it's interesting. A lot of the things you talk about, like I struggled with bulimia as well. And it took the kind of carnivore diet, even from the ketogenic diet, to heal me from that. I think even with the little bit of carbs allowed on a keto diet, I would still kind of fall back into, I think it was like the sugar cravings. And then what's also interesting is how you just talked about MCT oils. And yeah, I've actually heard that pretty often, that some people, even though it is antimicrobial, whether it's coconut oil or MCT oil, and maybe MCT oil is a little bit better than coconut oil, but there are people that, you know, when you have really severe gut health issues, that you probably shouldn't be taking those. And so there's a company I work with for gut health support, and they're not fans of coconut oil and MCT oil. You know, that's one that they're like, yeah, we don't recommend that. And it's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing with coconut oil is, I very early, even in my vegan days, I couldn't use it because I would get really inflamed from it, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I don't know if is it salicylates that it's high in, or I wasn't sure what it was. And then with the MCT, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So I think what they said was, so some of it is the salicylates for of the anti-nutrients, but I think they said the amount of concentration of these saturated fats, there's something that irritates the gut. And so it was something about that I don't, it's actually in one of our YouTube videos, but yeah, I just remember her bringing that up and talking.
Yeah.
So I bet you can mix of both though.
Yeah, and what was interesting to me was that, with MCT oil, I would not get the inflammation, but then I would notice a lot of stress on my adrenals. It was almost like somebody just like squeezed my adrenals, especially when I tried doing like, the bulletproof coffees, in the morning fasted, and all I would have, like, I wouldn't even add the butter to it, just the MCT oil. And the powdered stuff from, I'm not going to mention the company name, but the powder stuff was easier on my gut. So the liquid stuff was very painful on my gut, but the powder stuff was better. But I still noticed like a lot of that like stress on even my hormones. And like, in my brain did feel amazing, but I just felt like my adrenals were just being squeezed. I'm like, oh my God. And then, like with adrenal fatigue, which I used to have in the past, like a little bit of something like that, it has a really profound negative effect on me. So I like, once that happened, once that I noticed that, I'm like, I'm not going to be taking it, even though like I would have like really good positive brain effects. But yeah.
And it makes sense. I mean, when you're drinking coffee, that taxes the adrenals, and you're fasting, and then you're taking MCTs, which essentially lets the fat get absorbed through your body really quickly. And yes, it benefits your brain, but if you don't have the gut health, then it can actually, negatively impact that. And then also, like I don't know if you've noticed, but MCT oils now are coming in plastic bottles. They're not even in glass now. Yes. And so you don't even know if you're getting the proper ones. I mean, I think like you say, you really should listen to your body if it even makes sense for you to consume. And so, through your diet, how have you kind of healed your adrenals? That's a big topic that, a lot of people talk about is, even though I've gone carnivore, my hormones aren't, still the best, or I'm still having adrenal fatigue. So how did you kind of manage that on a meat-based diet?
For me, I've noticed that if I go higher on fat, like it's easier on my adrenals. If I up my protein, so if I eat leaner cuts of meat, it's a little bit harder. Like I do feel like that, instead of being energized after a meal, I feel tired and sleepy, so that was my clue. And then a lot of also that helped my adrenals was I used to fast a lot, and I used to work out a lot. And the combination of the two of those is, for me, at least for my body, I noticed that it just didn't work well. Like my adrenals would just, oh my God, it was hard for me to operate. I would get sleepy, tired, and even, later on when I overdid on fasting, and I would literally eat like twice a week, and I would work out like a maniac during that time. And I burned and I crashed really hard, and I learned the hard way. And it takes a while to recover from that. And for me, I'm the type of person that was very active from very early age. For me to stop working out was very hard, but I knew I had to do it. First of all, I didn't even have the energy in the morning to even go for a walk, because I felt like I was sleepwalking. And so for me, it was basically stop fasting. I would still do intermittent fasting, but mostly because my second meal would be so big that I didn't feel like eating for basically like 16 hours, maybe a little bit more. But I was basing that on how full I feel, how hungry I am, and it wouldn't be anything forced. But I wouldn't do like 24-hour fasts. So I would stop those, and definitely wouldn't fast for longer than, wouldn't do any like 3-day fasts, which I used to do as well. And then I would also, like I said, cut my working out. But that was basically by force, it was like my body telling me like, nope, you're not going to, like, if you want to sleepwalk, or you can stay in bed and get your rest, so that was the main things. And like I said, going higher on fat and then lower on protein.
That's interesting because I went through the same thing. So I have adrenal fatigue as well. Like sometimes I'll get up and it also might be a little bit of just low blood pressure because I've kind of had it my whole life too. So sometimes I get up really quickly and I get kind of dizzy.
Yes.
And so I noticed the days that I like don't really drink coffee, it helps that too. Like I used to do a lot of cardio and I do that less. But one thing that you're mentioning is, so when I have like a pound and a half of meat in a meal, I don't know if it was because I was like vegetarian almost for 12 years, but it's too much protein for me in one sitting. And it could be a ribeye. I could even add butter, but I get super sleepy after. And then I would check my glucose numbers and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in the diabetic range. And I think it was just too much. Yeah, it was like, I'd be like at 125. And so I started cutting, and that's when I broke apart my one meal a day into 2 meals and added more fat. And I'm noticing my energy is much better. Like I don't get that. And it's weird because I would never think I would get sleepy after just a carnivorous meal, but my energy would just tank.
Yes, and I did that exactly the same thing when, some people are such huge fans of OMAD, one meal a day. And I tried that and it works, but if you want to cram in like all the calories that you need for the day in that one meal, especially when you're struggling with adrenal fatigue, that's not a good idea. Like you will basically just want to sleep after the meal, and that's also what I did. I would have like a period of time that I would eat, and I would break down the big meals into smaller meals in order to get the energy, to be able to even extract the energy from that meal. So yeah, that's definitely, one of the things that helped me as well.
So what do you eat now in a day? I know everyone kind of varies in what they eat, but like what's a typical day look like for you?
Well, now I kind of, and I feel like I go through like different stages, like even throughout the past 2 years, I've been, trying higher protein, lower protein. I've been putting on fats very quickly, trying something else, like that's, yes, still carnivore, but it was basically like trying to, I've listened to a lot of people who are carnivore, and they say like I can eat as much as I want and never gain weight. Like it's impossible to gain weight on carnivore. So I'm like, well, let me eat a little bit more than what I used to. And I'm like, and I started putting on weight very quickly. I'm like, am I just like different than everybody else? It seems like calories don't matter, and the other people who talk about it. And for me, if I eat, essentially I was eating past my satiety levels. But then once I started doing that, it was very easy to start just eating more and more and going back to what I was used to, let's say 1,400 calories a day. Going back to that from going up to like 2,500 calories every day is hard because you essentially go past your leptin, you mess up your leptin, then all of that is not working as well as you used to. So going back from eating all that food to trying to eat what your body actually needs was hard, So I was experimenting a little bit with that, and I'm pretty convinced now, unless I'm a snowflake, that if I overeat on carnivore or eat more on carnivore, I just gain, But I hear a lot of people talk about, oh yeah, I can just eat as much as I want and never gain. So that wasn't my experience, and I'm definitely, as much as I don't like counting calories on carnivore, and that was one of the reasons why I even stuck on it for so long, was because I never had to. Like my body essentially got to a point when it was telling me like, okay, if you have one more bite, I'm just gonna throw up, which I never had before. Like I always envied my brother and sister because they would have a sandwich and they're like, oh my God, I'm so stuffed. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I can eat like 5 more, And I've had that for like my whole life pretty much. But for me, that was also related to working out. Your leptin levels and all the hormones are, all linked to that as well. So for me, when I was experimenting with the carnivore diet and just doing you know, going past my satiety, that messed up my hormones as well. And going back to where I used to be, I would have to start counting calories. Otherwise, it would be just like, oh yeah, as long as it's carnivore, it's fine, you know. And I would still have that mentality, oh, it doesn't matter how much it is, you know. And yeah, and I started putting on weight, and then I started counting everything I was eating. And for some people, it can be very, you know, stressful. And it is, you know, but at the same time, for me, it was just more like, okay, this is what, like, look at it, what it looks like, how big it is. This is what you were used to eating, you know, and this is what should satisfy you now. And it took me a little, probably like 2 weeks to go back to that lower energy intake in order for me to kind of like, okay, like I can lay off the counting. I know like my body is back to just letting me know on its own, you know, what it needs. So I went off on tangents. You just asked me.
No,
I'm sorry about that.
No. So let's talk about this weight gain real quick. So, you know, like I've heard a lot about that too, right? Like, don't worry about how much meat you eat. I agree. When you're kind of going through the adaptation process of carnivore, yes, like don't worry about, you know, like how much meat, how many pounds you eat, what kinds of meat, because let's just get adapted so that you're not craving sugar and carbs and all that stuff. That makes a lot of sense. But afterward, like you're saying, if you pass that leptin, that kind of satiety point, you can definitely increase your like hunger cues, right? So I myself gained a good amount of weight too ever since going carnivore. And I know why, because, you know, like if I'm stressed, I would just eat a bunch of cheese when I used to eat like chips, right? And cheese is a lot more calorically dense than chips. So like a little goes a long way. And I'm like, wow, like even with meat. So initially when I was doing OMAD, I was forcing myself to eat more and more because, I mean, I don't think anyone comes to carnivore and can just put down 1.5 pounds of meat if you weren't really eating that way before. So then you kind of forced it because you're like, no, I need to get this amount in. And so you're forcing your hormones to kind of adjust to that amount of eating. And then if you were to ever split your meals, now you are kind of more used to eating a lot more in a sitting. And so you're basically just increasing your appetite, but you're not really burning it off. So then you will inevitably gain weight, right?
Exactly. And it's almost like you're looking for that volume, you know, it's like, oh my God, I can just like definitely like visually even, you know, eat more. And like your stomach also, like, even though it's protein, it's not as bulky as fiber is, you're still kind of looking for that volume in the meal. And that was what was hard for me to go back to, you know. So yeah, it definitely took a little bit to go back to. And like I said, I had to go back to measuring because I did, prior to, you know, carnivore, I did go through a phase of, you know, doing the macros and counting everything. And I did that before and it was stressful. So that's why, you know, carnivore was very appealing to me, not needing to do that. So, but yeah, but to answer your original question, what I'm eating in a day, it's basically I like New York strips. Like that's like my favorite cut of meat. I know a lot of people like their ribeyes. I do like New York strips. So it's most of the time it's just New York strip. I do like adding some grass-fed liver. It's mostly chicken stuff, like chicken liver, because beef liver is a little bit too powerful, too pungent for me. But I do like experimenting with organ meats. Like I love beef tongue. Beef heart is really good. Like I enjoy it. I don't think people should be forcing anything that they don't like. You know, and I see that a lot. And they say like, oh, you know, because this doctor is saying that, or this person is saying that, and they have, you know, 100,000 followers on Instagram, they must be right. I'm like, well, maybe, but like if you are forcing this on yourself, like not enjoying it, like are you going to be able to stick to this? Are you going to be able to be consistent with that diet? You know, it's the same thing with working out. Like, can you be lifting 200 pounds, you know, doing squats with 200-pound barbell because this person is doing that? Like, I highly doubt it, you know, especially if you're just starting out lifting, so it's like, do what you're enjoying, and what you can stay consistent with, and if organ meats are not your thing, like, don't do it, it's, there are other ways to get your nutrients in.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, another thing I always talk about is, we need to get into kind of like that rest and relax state, that parasympathetic state. And if you're like having anxiety trying to put food down, you're probably in more of a stress state and you're not going to even digest it better. And then you may not even absorb the nutrients that you're trying to force yourself to take. So yeah, I agree with you. If you want this to be a lifestyle and to be sustainable, you have to eat the meats you like and prepare it in the ways you want. Because otherwise you're not going to be able to do it long term, like you're saying. I mean, I think those are really good words. In terms of the New York strip, so do you add extra fat? Because you're saying you kind of do better higher fat.
I don't, like, whatever is on there, it just seems to be like perfect for me. When I had a phase when I switched to eating ribeyes, mostly because they do have a higher fat content. And when I kind of like was plugging everything into a chronometer to see like the nutritional or macro breakdown, and it turned out like ribeyes do have probably like almost 60% fat to protein, so, and 40% protein. So I'm like, and I tried doing that, but for whatever reason, like, I was not really getting satisfied with that. So for me, I do need a little bit more protein than that. I would say probably like 60% of protein versus like 60% of fat, and then the rest, So for me, it took, a little bit figuring out like what really works for me. And then I do have some days where I just like don't feel like eating fatty at all, and I'll have just like fish or even chicken breast. And I know that many carnivores, they like gag when they see chicken breast, especially if it's skinless and boneless, like sometimes I want that, especially like I've noticed now that I moved from California to Arizona, and here it's much hotter. During like the days when it's 100 something degrees outside, I don't really feel like eating fatty meat. Like, I just don't, so I might eat either lighter or just, like fish or shrimp even, and I don't add any fat to it. So
that's really
it really
good.
Depends. Yeah.
I mean, I love that you have, gone through this whole journey to figure out what's best for you more than just, trying to follow some kind of dogma, whether it's like vegetarian or fruitarian or carnivore. It's just, yeah, most people don't eat fish because they're like, oh, it's not fatty enough, right? Or even the chicken breast. But I'm glad that, it's good to hear that, as a health coach, you are saying, no, listen to your body and everyone will be different. I mean, one thing that I know you shared in your stories, and I love that in your stories, you show a lot of your experimentations and you talk about things that a lot of people in the carnivore space don't. So people, I definitely recommend you check out her stories on Instagram. But you talked about how sometimes like connective tissue with your gut health kind of flares, like SIBO and SIFO. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because, like, as much as carnivore is healing, I want to also make sure that people are more realistic about carnivore and that there are some areas that aren't as ideal, right? So you can gain weight. I mean, it's a calorically heavy, calorically dense diet. And so if you overly eat, then you can gain weight, right? Especially if you've been under eating your whole life, or you decide to stop working out, and not like kind of lift weights kind of thing. So this is another one. So what's all about the connective tissue?
Yeah, I mean, that was very difficult for me because I actually started drinking bone broth in my keto days. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, whenever I would drink it, I would just go, like, after drinking it, maybe 30 minutes later, I would spend a lot of time on the toilet. And I'm like, what's going on over here? Like, it wasn't fatty, so I knew it wasn't the fat in it, and then I would notice a lot of inflammation in my body. And the way I notice inflammation in my body is basically like my whole body kind of swells up, and I can tell because like I can't see my ankles anymore, and it's like you can tell, like I can press it and it's just like inflamed, and then I would feel a lot of like brain inflammation as well, just mental fog. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, I'm drinking this amazing bone broth that I make myself from like all this collagenous tissue, you know, and chicken feet that are sourced like from the most amazing farmer I could find, you know, and I was having a lot of problems with that. And then later on, I found out that, you know, like those type of tissue, like the connective tissue, all that stuff, is actually very fermentable in the gut. That's why like a lot of carnivores, they don't need fiber because that connective tissue is essentially working as the plant fiber, and it's fermenting in the gut and supplying the bacteria. But if you're struggling with something like SIBO and SIFO, you will definitely get the negative effect of that you would get from, you know, the plant material as well. So for me, like I would even eat like, you know, chicken feet when I would cook the bone broth, like I would eat the skin off of the feet, you know, and there's a lot of collagenous stuff in it. And I would very quickly like get sleepy and tired and bloated and end up on the toilet again. And I'm like, this is just crazy. And then later on, I found out that, you know, I did struggle with SIFO. I did do a SIBO test that came back negative, and my, you know, gut doctor was like, well, what's going on over here? Like, you don't have SIBO. Like, this test is coming back negative. But then I was experimenting with some foods that if you eat them, essentially they would cause SIBO or SIFO issues. So I was eating them, and every single one would basically come back, cause me those problems. So I figured like, okay, it is probably SIFO. To test for SIFO is a little bit more challenging because you basically have to go through endoscopy. They take a test with a tube and then they send it to the lab if you really want to get a good test. So, you know, like my doctor wouldn't want to do that. So I just figured like, I'm going to eliminate like all the collagenous stuff. And sometimes even there's like a little strip under the New York strip under the fat that's a little bit collagenous. And when my SIFO was really bad, and it actually got worse with Mct oils, when I was experimenting with that, even eating New York strip would cause me issues. And then I would start cutting that off, that layer of fat and that collagenous layer, and I will be fine. You know, so I'm like, I figure like, yeah, that's for sure SIFO. And I did go on antibiotics. In the past, I did try the herbal stuff that it never worked for me. And this time I went on antibiotics, and it was a pretty safe antibiotic that doesn't really cause a lot of gut problems, doesn't kill off the good bacteria in the gut. So I used that, and after I think it was 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks of taking it, all my issues pretty much resolved, you know. And then I was kind of contemplating of taking some good probiotics, but you know, there are some research that shows benefits from probiotics, but I do believe that after pretty much 3 days, our gut microbiome can go back on its own to where it used to be. So I kind of opted against it, and I do feel pretty good right now, and I'm not experiencing any issues with that anymore. So, and I can have bone broth that's made with collagenous tissues versus like people who do suffer with SIBO or SIFO, they probably still can have bone broth, but only made with the marrow bones without any of the collagenous stuff.
Yeah, no, I love that you're talking about this because, you know, most people think that the reason they can't have bone broth is just histamine intolerance, but I think there's more than that, right? So I had a client that was watching your stories, made me go and watch the story where you're talking about the SIBO, SIFO on your, on even like a ribeye, just some of that like kind of like that chewy side. If you have SIBO or SIFO or just some gut issues, it can, it's kind of like a saccharide, like you're saying, and it can kind of affect your gut. And so my client started taking it off after watching your stories, and a lot of her runs were, it actually helped out. So that was some of it. And then she did some more functional testing to see, and she did have some gut issues, but for the most part, meat is very beneficial. But when some gut health, like C.Diff, if you have C.Diff, sometimes you have to take antibiotics, right?
Yes.
You can't just try to heal it with a meat diet. Like, it's not going to. And that's where I think, where when we say meat and water heals everything, I don't think that's fully true. And I think, right, you can kind of test.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I hear some people go carnivore and they are having, issues with diarrhea for a year after going carnivore.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is not normal. I'm like, that is not normal. Maybe in the beginning stages, a month or two, like going through, because your gut will go through some changes, will get rid of some things. Yeah, that might be normal. But if you're a year into carnivore and still struggling with diarrhea, that is absolutely not normal. And that's what I tell people as well. It's like, if you have C.Diff, you're not going to be able to cure it with carnivore diet, and you have to go on antibiotics. I know a lot of people are against antibiotics and they want to go a different route, but trust me, like with C.Diff, you can, oh my God, you can deplete your body so badly, like, trust me, like the antibiotics are going to save you. And I used to be that person too, where I absolutely wanted to avoid any and all antibiotics. And that's what I did when I had MRSA. And then MRSA turned into necrotizing fasciitis, which almost took my life.
Yeah.
Because with MRSA, I refused to take antibiotics. So then, and I I thought I cured it with taking massive doses of oregano oil and other antimicrobials, but then it came back with necrotizing fasciitis. So yeah, so now I'm telling people, like, I know you might hate antibiotics and you might worry about your gut, but there are easy ways to fix your gut. Maybe not necessarily easier, but antibiotics can save your life. So it's like, that was my case, and the same thing was for me with SIFO. I'm like, I'm not gonna take herbal stuff for years hoping that it helps me. I rather take antibiotic for 2 weeks, heal that, and then with carnivore diet, like, I was pretty confident that my gut would be fine, and it was. So it's like, yeah, I guess you can pick which route you want to go, but I tell people, like, antibiotics are not the evil. They can definitely have a place in healing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I did have a client, or I do have a client, had C.Diff, and then she was kind of hesitant to get on antibiotics because, all this work I've been doing with carnivore to heal my gut. And, like, we researched together what are the consequences of not healing C.Diff quickly, and it's actually pretty bad. And it's, you could die from it, actually. So, and I don't think oregano oil works for everyone, right? It's more of a lighter dose antifungal. And, I always say this, but there's so many different types of antifungals. The reason is because it doesn't fix it for everybody, and not everybody's body works the same. So, I think it's probably not right to say, no, all Western medicine is bad, right? I mean, there's a place for it, and for certain things that it is something to consider. Maybe if your kid gets an ear infection every month or so and taking that, maybe that's not the best. But for other things like C.Diff, MRSA, you may need it because it can save your life. Right?
Exactly. And I do think that it's individual as well. Like, if you want to go the natural route, that's fine, but just know that it might take a little bit longer. For me, I always feel like the plant antimicrobial stuff, like, it doesn't really work for me. Like, the oregano oil, I would say, like, it did help a little bit, but it's still, like, you don't really know if you got rid of it 100% or not, if it's still lingering in the back. So I kind of went from, like, being like the whole holistic person that will never take aspirin or anything else into, like, almost dying from basically not taking antibiotic, and now kind of believing, like, there is a place for it, and even with the antimicrobials, like, when recently it came back, the SIFO came back, I tried going the MCT route, which they say like, oh yeah, it can help. And I was doing that, and I was doing also the oregano oil and other antimicrobials as well. And I do believe that the MCT oil just made things worse. So it's definitely individual, definitely, up to the person, like which route they want to go, and they know the best, I think, and even though they might think they don't know, but they do know.
Carnivore, as much as it's a healing diet, I think we need to also be more practical about it, right? Like even the weight gain, a lot of people say just don't worry about ever exercising, eat as much meat as you want. But, if you use food for like coping emotionally, you eat, just keep pushing, past your satiety limits, you will increase your appetite, right? And you will gain weight. So if you consume more energy than you expend, then you will gain weight. Like that's just, it makes sense why you even did calorie counting for a while. I think when we first do this diet, we're not sure like how much to eat. So we just kind of go with what other people say of like 1 to 2 pounds to 3 pounds. But, just doing your own macros to see what does that even mean when you're like making your own meats and then just kind of eating this way is, I think it's beneficial. I actually started doing that to figure out, because I have no idea how many calories are in meat. So I was just trying to figure out, like, do I do better with 70% fat, and figuring that out, because that sleepiness after meals was horrendous. And now I know like how much more like fat I would need to add to make it more 70. And I would never have known that if I didn't track for like a few days. So in that way, I think it's really beneficial. And, I think, as we talk, what's really, you're one of the, more recent longer term carnivores, you're one of the first stories I've heard also going carnivore. And so you were an inspiration to me too. I think it's good to just hear that, carnivore is, again, like such a good tool, but it's not like this magic pill, right? So like with weight, we still have to put in the effort of, managing our weight and working out, and then even with our gut health, right? So obviously you have experienced so much of like the negative consequences of gut health.
And I even did go through C.Diff on carnivore as well. That's why,
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah, I actually did tests with Dr. Paul Saladino. He did a run test for me, and he called me right away. He's like, "Oh my God, like you need like antibiotics like right now," and I knew something was off, and I thought like, "Oh my God, maybe it's another like SIFO," because like C.Diff, yes, it's like it can take your life. Like, a lot of people think it's just diarrhea here and there. Like, no, like if you get antibiotics as soon as you can, because they probably will save your life.
And I think that also goes to what we're talking about also, is that sometimes we need testing, right? So a lot of people think, oh, I don't need a test. I know they're going to say my cholesterol is high on carnivore, so I don't need to go. My inflammation is probably low. But sometimes with gut health, it is beneficial too, because my client wouldn't have known that she had C. diff had she not tested, and she wouldn't have known that she had some of she thought it was candida the whole time, but it was actually something more serious, right? And she only knew that because she tested. And so that's where she could properly get treated. And you're right, there are people I know that do carnivore for over a year, and they're like, oh, if I just manage my fat, then I won't have the runs, but otherwise I have runs all the time. And it's like, it's not just managing the fat. There's something wrong that you can't handle more fat, right? A lot of people think it's just the rendered fat. It's because I can't tolerate rendered fat, and so therefore I have the runs. But I really think it's something beyond that. And so
it's either that, or they say it's too much protein. So I'm like, and they say like it's individual. It's either too much protein or it's either too much fat. I'm like, okay, but what if it's none of those? Like, what do you do then? Like, you just go off, and a lot of people actually do stuff carnivore because they just can't figure it out. But like, to your point, like, it might just take one test to figure out that it is SIBO, and just make small changes and be done with it, and keep going carnivore and feeling great.
I think the reason why these kind of symptoms kind of arise more on carnivore is because it's ultimately an elimination diet, right? So you remove all the toxins, and so then maybe your body will show more of some of the stuff that's been kind of lingering or hiding. And that's when you can pinpoint easily. But I think so many people then end up kind of blaming carnivore, like, oh, it doesn't work on my gut. But it's actually maybe you're that much closer to finding out what's wrong with your gut, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And for me, when I did testing with Dr. Paul Saladino, we actually found out that I was deficient in a lot of nutrients, a lot of B vitamins. And I don't know if you want to talk about fasting a little bit, but that was the point when I was fasting a lot. And not many people realize that you can become nutrient deficient if you overdo it. You know, if you go on those prolonged fasts, and on top of that, you exercise, you know, like crazy. And for me, like, it was shocking to me because, you know, I used to be anemic, and then my anemia went away. And when I first started carnivore, like the first year, I wouldn't necessarily do like 24-hour fast. I would only do like intermittent fasting, you know, and that would be maybe like 16, 18 hours. And I was fine. Like, I was tracking my nutritional values or vitamins and all that stuff. And it was like spot on. Everything was perfect. And then later on, I started doing, you know, a little bit of 3-day water fast and then 5-day water fast. I went into dry fasting for like 5 days.
Oh, wow.
But it wasn't like all in one, you know, month or so, but like spread out. And then I started noticing more and more nutritional deficiencies, and I was thinking, like, what's going on over here? I'm still, you know, eating meat, and I started eating more organ meats as well, and all these nutritional deficiencies started popping up, and as well as my anemia came back. And it was, you know, when my doctor tests for anemia, he tests for all the iron levels, you know, like the ferritin and, you know, like the blood and everything. And I was empty on all levels. Oh, wow. So he's like, well, what's going on? Like, you're eating all this meat, you're eating all this liver, and I was eating raw liver too at that point, you know. And then I realized, I'm like, maybe it is all the fasting that I've been doing, you know, maybe that's what's depleting me. So I'm kind of getting ready to retest everything again, and I've stopped doing like 24-hour fasting. Sometimes I do the intermittent fasting, but it's very like sporadic. I do eat kind of 3 smaller meals a day, but I still end up like not eating for 12 hours before I have to eat again. So I'm trying to test again to see if you know, the reason for that was all that fasting that I was doing. So we'll see. But I do believe, and I did hear few of my colleagues who are also coaches within, like, they do carnivore and keto, and their clients coming back with a lot of B vitamin deficiencies. So we're kind of trying to figure out like what's going on over there.
That's really interesting. So I took the oats test, and it's one of those functional tests, and so I was B6 deficient, but I attribute, so I do fasting, but I don't do a ton of like extended fasting. So in general, it's just like 16, 18, sometimes 20. But I attributed it to gut health. So like a lot of my clients that have gut, you know, dysbiosis, then when we, and they show some other B deficiencies as well. So, and again, these are all carnivores. So it's again, another thing that everyone thinks, oh, I'm good with B vitamins, but actually I bet if a lot of carnivores were to measure their B vitamins, they may be deficient. And yes, maybe it is some of that extended fasting. It makes a lot of sense what you're saying. But it could also be some of the gut health, you know, so like if your gut health is not well, then you won't break down and absorb the nutrients. And so because B vitamins are water soluble, you may just pee it out. So that's something else to consider.
Yeah, for me, I also thought that would be the issue, especially with the iron and stuff like that. But I did, you know, like I mentioned before, like first when I started carnivore, like and I did test before going carnivore as well, and I was deficient on ketogenic diet. I was deficient in nutrients, and I was still like borderline anemic. And then I went for a year on carnivore, all the deficiencies disappeared. And then again, then I started experimenting with the fasting, and that's when I started noticing deficiencies. So I would agree, you know, I would think I thought the same thing, you know, like, oh, it's my gut, I'm not observing properly. and or maybe I don't have enough enzymes or hydrochloric acid. But then again, like I said, like the first year was fine, and then all of a sudden, like I'm noticing, and it was huge deficiencies as well. It was B6 too, and most of the B vitamins as well, but B12. B12 is kind of tricky to test for. But yeah, my anemia was like the worst it has ever been. So. Wow. So yeah, so that's kind of something that I'm trying to like figure out and see what's going on, if it is the fasting.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see your results. If you feel better, I think that's a big indication of probably better health anyway. So do you supplement at all? Other than when you're going through the antibiotic runs, like do you supplement with anything on carnivore?
When I was going through the antibiotics, I did, because I did feel like I almost was, I don't want to say was craving supplements, but when I was wanted to take them, like I didn't feel like I don't want to take this, versus like now where I kind of like think, oh, maybe I should take a B supplement or something. Like it just it doesn't make me feel like I want to take, it's almost like makes me feel nauseous. Like, so I'm like repulsed to take it now, as opposed to before, like I was fine with taking it. So before, yes, I would take methylated B complex, and I would never take iron supplement, because I don't believe that that's a good route to go. But I was just eating more liver and eating more kidneys and stuff like that. And then sometimes I don't always feel like eating organ meats, so I would take a supplement form of that. And I did start noticing, because throughout this whole time I was testing with my doctor, and my iron levels did improve a little bit, but they're still like, they were bottom low. So you can definitely increase the iron level with just increasing the organ meat consumption. At least in my case, I did, but it still wasn't enough. So I figured after that, like stopping the, excessive, not necessarily excessive, but the fasting, and see what happens after that. And right now I don't supplement. Oh, let me think. I actually take the BPC 157 oral supplement, which is supposed to, it's a peptide, and it's supposed to help, especially the oral form of it, because most of it, like you see it in the bodybuilder builders forms, and they use it for certain injuries and stuff like that. And I've used it when I went through knee surgery, and I used it for that, but I never used the oral form. And now I'm using it to heal the gut lining and hopefully improve everything else, because it also will help with inflammation and other stuff like that. So I do supplement with that now, and kind of, and I am seeing improvements from that too. So, but that's the only thing. Yeah, that's the only thing. And I used to supplement when I was exercising a little bit more. I was supplementing with magnesium. But then if I take just a little bit too much magnesium, like I get the runs. So, and it depends like what form as well. But yeah, I don't do it now because I'm not exercising all that much.
Okay.
But yeah, that's about it.
What would you recommend to, new people that are trying the carnivore diet?
For me, what worked the best was making it simple, and at the beginning with the carnivore, when I found out about carnivore diet, I found out through Dr. Sean Baker, and he's very popular when it comes to carnivore diet. He was basically just saying, steak, water, and salt. And for me, that worked. That worked very well. And, the least complicated and the least meal prep or whatnot, and thinking about micronutrients and the glycine to methionine ratio. Like, once I started going into that, like, I was just like, oh my God, that's too much. That's like dealing with the bodybuilder macros, and then breaking all that down, like 40% fat, 4%, carbs, and then 20 fat, and then figuring it was like going back to those days. I'm like, that's too much for me, So I like the idea of just doing it simple, you know, and if there are like figure out what's your favorite, if you like ribeye the best and the way to make it, like don't worry about what they say about burning the meat or that it's gonna cause issues or it's gonna cause cancer. If you like your meat grilled, grill it, you know, it's like you're gonna be fine. And just make it prepared the way you like it and if you can stay consistent with that for a long time, you're going to experience a lot of healing, you know? So just, yeah, like I said, just, I guess, make it simple, you know, make it simple, enjoyable, and be consistent.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really good advice. I think the more complicated you make it, and I always get the back end questions from people like, I heard that you need to ground up like eggshells to get the calcium, or people are putting glycine on top of their steak. Like, what's that all about? And I always get, and I'm like,
Gosh.
I said this recently.
It's funny because like even prior to this whole like putting even collagen on the steaks, like I would add glycine to my water. Oh my gosh, like the pain in my joints I got from that because glycine converts to oxalates in the body, you know. Same thing with collagen and same thing with the collagenous tissue, you know, like in the bone broth. So, you know, some people who don't have the bacteria to break down the oxalates and who do struggle with gut issues, they will experience that. And for me, it was so bad I could not walk. So I'm like, and then I would see a lot of people supplement with glycine. I'm like, that's all well and good, but I hope you don't get into the pain that I got from doing all of that. So people should be really careful, you know.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what's interesting in that whole cycle? It was in one of my other YouTube videos, but if you are deficient in B6, the likelihood of it becoming oxalates is even more. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like such a big fan of bone broth, but maybe I should kind of back away a little bit and say, you know, depending on your health being A, B, C, then maybe you could do bone broth, you know?
Exactly. And then, well, with bone broth, at least you're getting some nutrients with it. When you go into something that's so synthesized and so like one single nutrient like glycine, like collagen, like people are not realizing that collagen should come with the B6, you know, with other nutrients that help you, you know, synthesize that in your body in order to make it usable. And when you buy just that collagen that's so purified, like you're causing more issues, like, you know, I get a lot of clients. Yeah, I get a lot of clients who love their collagen with the coffee in the morning. I'm like, I don't know how you love it. I mean, good for you, but you're not helping yourself at all, you know? And then I would recommend them like stop drinking that, but because they would complain about bloating as well. I'm like, stop doing that and see how you feel. And they feel amazing, you know, just with black coffee. And I'm like, yeah, there's some good to it, but I feel like now with the more purified stuff and concentrated stuff, like those things are not necessarily good, you know?
No, I agree. Those collagen powders and peptides are so popular right now. But, you know, I don't think people understand that it can become oxalates in your body, especially if you're B vitamin deficient, especially if you have gut problems. And then, you know, a lot of people promote glycine as, hey, it's that one sweet, kind of like sweetish flavor. So you can have a little bit of sweet. And then so people are starting to put that in their coffees as well. But all of that can cause more damage, right? Like,
it can cause a lot of problems. And that's why I'm like, there's a reason why it comes in a nice package of steak and one package, like nice package of like whole animal, that it works together because it comes with other nutrients, you know? So even like some people might not react to the collagen in the meat, the connective tissue, like all that with the meat that also has B vitamins in it, it will help you, you know? But if you go to that one single nutrient and then you're just eating it on its own, like I can't see a benefit in that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's good. I'm glad that I'm not the lone one, because I brought it up recently and then people are like, this is the first time I've ever heard this. And it's like, so do you think I'm making it up? You know what I mean? Like it's because people are so on the collagen, peptide, hydrolyzed proteins. And Yeah, but I mean,
And it's in everything now. Now they're already made coffees with that. You can see the Vital Proteins water with the collagen. I'm like, this is insane. But you
yeah.
know.
So let's talk a little bit about your carnivore snacks, right? Like I've tasted so many different, carnivore snacks because, sometimes you want to eat something like pork rinds or beef jerky, and nothing is as good as your carnivore snacks. Seriously, it's my kids love it. My husband's like, wow, there's something that wants me to come back to the bag and then eat a little more. There's like this umami flavor. Maybe it's a little bit of the salt with the meat texture. But if you want to talk a little bit about it, what made you think of this brilliant snack, and then like when is it going to be available and all that good stuff?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I kind of created it for like selfish reasons, because later on I started traveling a lot, and even though most of the places you can get some meat thing, like I like supporting local, and I like supporting regenerative farming, and to me it is important. Like those are the reasons why I went vegan back in the day, thinking that I could save the planet that way. But when I went carnivore, like for me, grass fed, and just not even grass fed, but working with the local farmers, supporting their family, like was important to me. So I always wanted to have something that's nutritious and is not loaded like with all the garlic. That's like my body doesn't agree with that whatsoever. And then all the apple cider vinegars or other fillers that basically they used to make the weight. And going into that business, I learned how making a weight is important in order to make money from making a product. And everywhere I went, they were telling me like, you won't even have a company because this is not profitable. I'm like, well, let's make it profitable. So I wanted to create something that's nutritious, that doesn't have any chemicals in it, that was just salt and meat, and that came from the place that I believe in. Because a lot of the jerkies out there, even though they might be grass fed, like they are sourced from outside of the US, and I do want to make sure that we're supporting US farmers, that are doing the hard work, that are making sure that their animals are treated properly, that are raised in the right way, and they're improving the environment at the same time. So that was important to me. That's why I went into on this whole journey, and basically it started from just me wanting to have a good quality meat in my backpack, whenever I travel or go, so that was that. And I'm excited because we're hoping to start the whole thing, the Kickstarter, like back in December, I think, of last year. And it's been just a huge journey trying to find the right people to work with, that are kind of passionate about the same things that I am. And we are finally launching April 22nd, and that's going to be on Earth Day. And I thought, like, what a perfect day to launch this, because I do believe that this product will support, the regenerative farming, and it will be nutritious, and and it will, like, you won't have to sacrifice anything when you travel or when you just want something healthy.
Like I've dried some meat before and it does not taste like your meat. It was, and I like that, they're in kind of portioned out, bags, so that if I wanted a full meal with one, and you have ones that are more leaner cut and more, fattier cuts like ribeye. And so it's just a great option, a real meal option when you're literally on the go. And you don't have to worry about sourcing the quality of the meat, and it tastes good. It's not like, oh, I have to kind of muscle through eating this stuff that doesn't taste good. I mean, it's really good. I mean, it definitely will be yeah. Okay, yeah. So I will put all your information about Carnivore Snacks in the show notes so that people can buy it and try it, because yeah, it's really good. So
thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And yeah, if people want to sign up for the email list, it's at Carnivore Snacks with an X at the end.com. And if they do subscribe to the list or enter their phone number, they will be notified when they are like the first ones to like get the best deal on the Kickstarter, because it is important with the Kickstarter to like get, you know, it up front as many people as possible, especially in the first 48 hours, in order for the project to be successful. Then we definitely want it to be successful so we can actually get it out to people. So if people could do that for us, that would be amazing, and really, really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, you know, as we're closing, I mean, is there anything else you want to share? Any advice? Just anything about the carnivore diet? One question is, do you think carnivore is kind of for everyone? Like everyone could find benefits in it? Do you think there are some people that, you know, maybe it's not for them?
I do think that it's, I don't think it's for everyone. Like, I honestly think that it can, I mean, it is an elimination diet, and it is very restrictive, and to many people it feels very restrictive. Like for me, it doesn't. That's why I've been on it for over 2 years, and if I felt restricted on it in any way whatsoever, I would not have done it for so long. And so yeah, I think that for those who feel like if they cannot survive without having sweet potato every day, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, you know, to add that in, you know, as long as you know that that sweet potato is not causing you any joint pain or any other autoimmune issues, you know. But then if you're just lying to yourself because you want to eat it, then it's a totally different story, you know. But yeah, I don't think it's for everyone, you know, and you kind of, like, people have to figure out a way of eating that does for them, that they can be consistent with, that makes them feel healthy mentally and physically, because that's important.
You're not at that point that you want to commit, not just for weight loss, right, but for like healing, or something's just like, oh man, I'm willing to go just all meat based because something's wrong with my health, then I think it's hard to stay carnivore, because if it's not a fad diet, and it's not right, so it's not something like that. So where can people find you?
I'm at biohacking.chick, and I do need to change that because I don't like the biohacking thing, but that's where I'm at on Instagram, and that's mainly where I'm at, although I'm not super active on it because I'm quite busy. Even this whole coronavirus time, I'm still working full time, and I'm not active, but I still try to put out some information on it, and that's probably like the main place people can find me at. And I have links there if people want some coaching or whatnot. So yeah, that's the main place.
Okay, and I'll put it in the show notes again too. Well, thank you so much for your time. This is so helpful. I think, you know, it gives a more realistic glimpse into the carnivore diet, and I just appreciate your candor and just you know, just your wisdom on it. So thank you very much again, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.